My name is Jeffrey Thomas. I'm going to be doing a reading for you. I had two books come out in 2020. A novel called The American. It's a horror novel set in contemporary Vietnam. This came out from Geraldstone. And the other book of mine that came out in last year is a collection of horror stories called Carrion Men from Plutonian Press. So the story I'm going to be reading to you was originally published on a website called The Dream People back in 2000. Wow. And rereading the story today reminded me why I'm happy that I took early retirement at the age of 62. So the story is called Scorpion Face. If John could see his own alternate self on that other plane of existence in which he resides, he might name that being Scorpion Face. This creature, smaller than John by a foot and greatly bent in addition to that, has a pale, bald head twice the size of John's and a face that shades into obsidian black. These chitinous features look mechanical, but are organic. Two matching rows of articulated arms, with a tail-like limb at the bottom, which uncoils seemingly upon its own will to flick at the air. Sloughing, gauzy membranes like cobwebs cover its long, bony hands and the back of its head in place of hair. It wears shabby black clothes, much too small even for its tiny frame, like a tuxedo with a long forked tail. Whenever it ventures out, it wears an immense top hat. It never goes outdoors when it goes out, however, as there is no outdoors in this dimension. Only endless labyrinths, tunnels, dust-choked attics upon attics, web-cloaked basements, and sub-basements. John wakes to a clock radio that blares annoying snatches of music between lengthy discourses by smarmy DJs. He opens his eyes to a gray and wordless despair, as he does every day, his only comfort being that he can hit the snooze alarm and sleep another half an hour before waking again to a gray and wordless despair. In its world, John's doppelganger sits in a corner with its great head resting on its knees, its spindly arms wrapped around its shins. Pain awakens it, and it scrambles out of the corner on hands and knees, glancing back over its shoulder at the long black nails that continue to extend from the walls where they meet. The being trails the shroud of cobwebs that has formed like a cocoon around its body while it slept, the stuff of its own dreaming exhalations. Standing, it brushes more of these webs off its arms and sides. With jerky darting motions like those of a bird, its facial appendages clicking, the creature moves to a cracked and slanted mirror. When it sees its reflection, it wails in a high, shrieking voice, just as it does every day. John drinks an instant coffee, showers, drives 30 minutes to work. As he steps out of his car and looks across the lot at the squat, sprawling building, bleak against the blue winter sky, he has the irrational impulse to duck back inside his car and drive away, drive anywhere, without direction, without money, to just escape in a blind and numbing panic. Instead, he starts across the parking lot to the building's metal side door. Top hat on, Scorpion Face emerges from its series of small dusty rooms into a narrow, low-ceilinged corridor formed from rotting planks of wood, stretching off in either direction into seemingly limitless gloom. As it makes its way, a walk of several hours by John's reckoning of time, it passes off-branching hallways and metal hatches in the ceiling and floor with ladders to other levels. The walls change from wood to riveted plates of black metal scabbed with rust, covered in cables and hoses, turning gears and churning pistons, grease and dripping slime, and Scorpion Face has to tear its way through veils of webs at times. Finally, for the last stretch of its walk, the corridor becomes chiseled from rock, slick with mold and trickling with water, lit with far-spaced bare bulbs. It stops at last at a door labeled with 15 black nails driven into the wood in a circle, with a huge white moth pinned in the middle of the circle by those spikes. The moth twitches, still alive. The being turns a knob and lets itself into its workplace. At no time, since leaving its apartment, has it seen another of its kind. John sits in a cubicle with padded partitions upon which are pinned a few snapshots of his two daughters, whom his wife has custody of. He speaks on the phone for much of the day, but seldom to the people in the other cubicles. Just these disembodied voices, usually angry at him because to them he is the company personified. He is that bleak, sprawling building, and he tries to soothe them. He will run a UPS trace to find out why they haven't received their package. He will have them credited. He will do his best. He logs each call he makes onto a sheet, usually 100 unhappy voices a day. He feels like a medium who can only channel the voices of furious ghosts. Scorpion Face stands in a tiny chamber that shakes like a rickety elevator, great unseen machinery clanking and thrumming behind the metal walls. Glass tubes crisscross before his gaze, and it watches hordes of tiny insects crawl through these, each insect carrying a glowing orange nugget of matter like a hot glob of metal. The little entity throws switches that close off one tube, open another, direct the insect stream here instead of there. Occasionally, steam bursts from a vent in the wall. Once in a while, a sound of rushing liquid passes beneath its feet. Its top hat hangs from a nail in the wall, and the only other decoration is 4 huge black snail shells stuck to the walls here and there. Tomorrow, they will have slowly repositioned themselves, but they will not have escaped this room. At lunch, John buys a tuna sandwich from a machine and sits alone at a table to eat it and drink oily black coffee. The lettuce in his sandwich is slippery and limp. He finds it hard to imagine that this tuna and that coffee found their origins in living things. From the corner of his eye, he watches the young office girls clustered at one table, pretty and giggling, and as removed from him as the women on television. He focuses on the marketing supervisor, who is young and very pretty, and crouches in front of the refrigerator to get something from the bottom shelf, her shirt riding up to show the taut skin of her lower back. He pictures himself holding her waist and entering her from behind. It's a position he fantasizes about most, because he is made uncomfortable by the idea of a woman actually looking into his eyes during intimacy. Scorpion Face takes one break in what by John's perception would be 16 hours. It opens a cabinet, and inside finds 4 glass jars filled with a glowing green fluid. It unbuttons its vest and its shirt beneath, and then slides open a tiny drawer from inside its abdomen. Into this metal drawer, it pours the contents of each jar slowly until the drawer is full. It carefully slides its drawer back into its flesh, rearranges its clothing, and then replaces the small jars inside the cabinet. It never sees who fills the jars in its absence. It never sees any other of its kind. They work different shifts, travel by different corridors, live and work in different rooms. It has never seen another of its kind, and it never will. At home, John logs onto the internet. He enters, stealthily and guiltily, as if peering into a bedroom window, a sex-oriented chat room. He finds a woman willing to talk dirty with him. He suspects she is lying about her blonde hair and breast size, and maybe even her age, but it doesn't really matter. He masturbates right there at his desk, one hand on the mouse, as if that is his penis. Afterwards, he feels empty, as if he is squeezing out a dollop of his soul each time and never getting it back. He shuts off that box and turns on the box of his TV instead, watches one obnoxious sitcom after another, cute friends and cute lovers feuding and making up. He finds it hard to believe those actors are living beings like himself. He likes to read in magazines about actors who are addicted to drugs or commit suicide. In its own series of rooms again, Scorpion Face stands before a control panel of wheels and levers and manipulates a metal puppet inside a booth recessed in the wall. Some of the marionette's complex joints and multiple limbs are articulated by wires from above, and others by rods from below. A second silhouetted, spider-like thing emerges from a hole in the opposite wall, commanded by whatever unseen being lives in the next apartment. The 2 puppets begin to interact erotically with grinding and scraping sounds, their many limbs interweaving. Particles of rust or blistered paint sift from between their frenziedly abrading forms. They pump and thrash, scuttle and twined, and Scorpion Face watches dully enraptured, projecting its imagination inside them. At last the puppets lie quiet, limbs and wires still tangled, and the beings slump exhausted at their controls, hands clammy as they clutch onto the wheels for support. The other's spider disengages itself and withdraws through a black curtain over that hole in the wall. The lights in the puppet theater go dim. It's time to retire for the night, although there is no day or night here. John sits on the edge of the bed, still in his office clothes except for his tie. He wants to put a pistol's barrel in his mouth and burst the top of his balding head open, a shattered chrysalis, so that his brain might fly free from its imprisoning skull, if only in brief may-fly life. But he is too cowardly to even buy a pistol, let alone put one inside his mouth. He rises to undress for bed. Scorpion Face has killed itself again, as it often does. It lies crumpled on the floor with a large black nail driven into its skull. But it will awaken soon, curled in the corner inside a cocoon of web. And it will shriek when it sees itself in the mirror and realizes it is still, unendingly, alive. That was my story, Scorpion Face, which appears in my latest collection of short stories, Carrion Men, from Plutonian Press. And, as I say, in 2020, my novel, The American, also came out. It was on the preliminary ballot for the Bram Stoker Awards, at least, and from Journalstone. And so, it's been 21 years since my first reading at ReaderCon. And I have a few more minutes, actually. That was a short story. My first reading at ReaderCon, I read from my book, which was new at that time. It just come out, Punktown. When I started reading, the only person in the audience was my wife at the time, Rose, and my wife Rose is hearing impaired, but I was there to read, so I started reading. Luckily, 3 other people eventually came in too, so it wasn't. There's probably not many more people than that watching this right now, but that was my first reading at ReaderCon, and I don't think I've read again at ReaderCon since maybe 2008 or so. I don't know when my book Dead Stock came out, and I haven't attended a ReaderCon in a while, so it's nice to at least be here in this manner. So thank you for listening to my story and giving me a little of your time. Jeffrey Thomas, signing out.